Under Cardenas, the Mexican Revolution resumed its advance. Land distribution to the villages on a massive scale was accompanied by a many-sided effort to raise agricultural productivity and to improve the quality of rural life. Labor was encouraged to replace the old corrupt leadership with militant leaders and to struggle for improved conditions. A spirit of service began to pervade at least part of the governmental bureaucracy. In this way, Cardenas was sort of like John F. Kennedy in giving a spirit of service and hope. He set an example to subordinates by the democratic simplicity of his manners, by cutting his own salary in half, and by making himself available to the delegations of Indians and workers who thronged the waiting rooms of the National Palace. In this way, being down to earth, talking to people, providing hope, he was kind of like FDR, with whom his presidency was concurrent. And I like to think of him as the FDR of Mexico. He certainly is regarded as the greatest president of the 20th century for Mexico. These and other policies of the new president, such as the closing down of illegal gambling houses, most of which were owned by wealthy callistas, angered the Jefe Maximo. In June of 1935, Calle summoned a number of senators to a special meeting at Cuernavaca. He denounced the labor movement and its alleged radicalism, and ominously recalled the brief tenure of President Ortiz Rubio, implying that he might choose to force Cardenas out and put in his place someone more compliant. Cardenas responded by requesting the resignation of all of his cabinet members. Then he proceeded to form a new cabinet dominated by the left wing, but representing a broad coalition of anti-Callista elements from right to left. There followed a purge of reactionary state governors, acclaimed by peasants and worker demonstrations. By the end of 1935, Cardenas was the undisputed master of Mexico. In April of 1936, amid indications that Calles was planning a coup with the aid of a fascist organization in Mexico called the Gold Shirts and other reactionary groups, Cardenas ordered his immediate deportation to the United States. Now, this is the 1930s. This is the time of fascism in Europe. You know who the two people on the left are, Il Duce and the Fuhrer. On the right there is their friend in Spain, Francisco Franco, who they helped take control of Spain during the Spanish-American War. There were fascist elements in all countries, and this was a concern to the sort of left-wing counter-coup, so to speak, that Cardenas had pulled off, and it was a real threat, but he crushed it. Having consolidated his political control, Cardenas proceeded to implement his reform program. He regarded land distribution as of prime importance. Land was distributed to the peasants in a variety of ways according to the climatic and soil conditions of the different regions. The principal form was the ejido, the communal landholding system, with each ejidatario, a holder of a piece of an ejido, entitled to use a parcel of community land. The ejido was the focal point of the agrarian reform, but Cardenas also distributed land in the form of the rancho, an individual small holding widely prevalent in northern Mexican states where ranching made more sense. Finally, in regions where natural conditions favored large-scale cultivation of such commercial crops as sugar, cotton, coffee, rice, large cooperative farms, sort of collective ejidos, were organized on a profit-sharing basis. The government generously endowed these enterprises with seeds, machinery, and credit from the Banco de Crédito Edihal, the Ejido Bank. So basically, the creation of these large collective farms bowed to the economic realities of large-scale capitalism while still trying to help the small-scale campesino. During the Cardenas years, some 45 million acres of land were distributed to almost 12,000 villages, much greater scale than Obregón and Calles. The Cardenas distribution program struck a heavy blow at the traditional semi-feudal hacienda and peonage. It satisfied the land hunger of the Mexican peasantry for the time being and promoted a general modernization of Mexican life and society. By 1940, thanks to the land reform, supplemented by the provision of villages with schools, medical care, roads, and other facilities, the standard of living of the peasantry had risen, if only modestly. These progressive changes in turn contributed to the growth of the internal market and therefore of Mexican industry. It allowed Mexicans to begin consuming a little bit, and that helped fuel an economic spiral. The land reform also justified itself in terms of productivity. Average agricultural production during the 3-year period from 1939 to 1941 was higher than it had been at any time since the beginning of the Revolution. Granted these benefits and Cardenas' excellent intentions, the fact remains that the land reform suffered from certain structural defects. To begin with, it was basically conceived of as a means of satisfying land hunger rather than as an instrument of dynamic agricultural development. We wanted to boost productivity to the best point. Obviously, we just put the land in charge of a handful of giant agribusinesses. But seeking to satisfy land hunger by the grant or restitution of land to the villages, government agencies overlooked the need to establish agricultural units that would be viable from an economic point of view. It's that same problem. Land redistribution on a small scale really comes up against economic realities of the modern age. In many cases, the ejido parcel, especially in areas of very dense population, was too small to be an ongoing concern. Much of the distributed land was of poor quality. The agrarian laws always allowed the landowner to retain a portion of his estate. Naturally, he kept the best portion for himself. And aid in the form of seeds, technical assistance, and credit was frequently inadequate. Same problems with calles, just not quite as bad, but they still existed. In addition, the peasant received his land from the government. This is an important point. He received his land from the government and was tied to the government through the operations of the agricultural department, the Banco de Crédito Ejidal, and the officially organized peasant leagues. Thus, he was increasing. This was sort of a campesino self-support and political organizations. Thus, he was increasingly dependent on the public authorities. Under Cardenas, officials of these agencies often worked in a spirit of disinterested service, sought to develop a peasant collective initiative and democracy. Under his successors in the presidency, however, they tend to become corrupt and self-seeking. You've got a giant public bureaucracy. That's an opportunity for corruption. To enmesh the peasantry and its organizations in a bureaucratic network that manipulated them to satisfy its own interest. After 1940, the Mexican governments increasingly favored the large private property and neglected the ejido. In concert with the structural defects of the land reform, this produced a gradual decline of the ejido system and a parallel growth of a large landed property, leading to the emergence of a new latifundio. Not as severe, but not unlike the problems of the Porfiriato. The PRI, in creating a massive single-party state, encouraged corruption that kept, to some degree, poverty endemic.